But yeah, so and then I went up this morning and they have, I mean, those guys are getting after it. So about
Awesome.
every exterior wall in the building has sheetrock on it, and about three-fourths of the sheetrock has already been taped and floated. Uh,
Wow.
and now they've got guys working on that, and then they've got guys working on interior walls now. So they were working on the office this morning.
Now
And the hallway.
we'll get a complete paint job, won't we, out of this?
We
Yeah,
will, yes.
yeah,
Yep.
good.
We got to pick paint colors and all that jazz. So yeah,
Yeah,
everything will
good.
get repainted. Everything's going to get deep cleaned. We're going to get new carpet and new floors in the kids' rooms, and most likely new tile in the foyer and the bathrooms.
That's what I
Um,
was afraid of.
yeah,
I knew that hasn't been taken up yet, has it?
it has not,
Yeah.
because the insurance has to okay it first. Because a couple things happened to the tile. First of all, obviously it had water on it, um, and but then when the when the pit for the elevator overflowed and that oil and hydraulic fluid got on the tiles, you
Uh,
there, I mean, you can get most of it off, but you can't get all of it off. And because the grout is porous, it seeps into the grout. And what's
you
going to happen?
noticed that.
Yeah, and so it's either going to stink, number one,
Yep.
which it will, or number two, it's going to, when it finally dries this summer, then that oil is going, it's going to separate the glue and the tile's going to pop off, especially right there around the elevator. And so, in a way to prevent that from happening and having us to come back and deal with that again, then our contractor is going to suggest to the insurance company that they just go ahead and replace it, and because um, I mean, it's a 20-year-old tile, so it's discontinued, so we wouldn't be able to find an exact match anywhere. Um, so we'll do that, um, and then the
You're gonna
Have
go
bathroom.
we
with the
been
dark.
have we been there 20 years? How long?
Yeah, 2001, 2002 is when the building was built.
Man, I can't. Doesn't seem that long ago.
Right.
Of course, I'm not that old either.
Right.
So.
No. You're still the same age. It's fine.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Oh,
yeah, I was so I don't know if I've put this in an email in any of the church emails or not, but my church in Wichita Falls, when I was there, we had a water break as well, and it was actually in the attic of the second floor of,
oh,
Oh,
of the education building, and so it flowed down from the attic, filled up the second floor education space, and then came through the ceiling or through the floor, which became the ceiling of the fellowship hall, and filled up our fellowship hall and kitchen. And like we had a ramp down into the fellowship hall, and it came about two-thirds of the way up the ramp. There was probably, when we first discovered it, there was probably 3 feet of water in the
oh.
fellowship hall, and that was the downstairs. Fortunately, the walls were brick, so we didn't have to rip out drywall in the fellowship hall. But anyway, that's a long story. Anyway,
Maybe
there was
somebody should have checked into his resumes a little deeper.
I know, right? Like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
there's a
Yeah.
pattern here.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think so.
That's right. Every church I'm gonna ever go to, do we have a backup generator just in case?
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so there was a fiberglass plant in Wichita Falls. It was St. Gobain Certainteed, and they make fiberglass insulation. And there were a couple of church members that worked there. I met them when I first got appointed there, and our families connected well. And so when I walked into the worship center yesterday and I saw all these bags of fiberglass insulation with Certainteed St. Gobain on them, I was like, hey! And so I snapped a picture of it and I texted him. I said, I thought of you. We had a water
Yeah.
break.
Yeah.
And I
Okay,
thought
here
of you.
comes the kickback now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Uh-huh.
So she's like, "Oh yeah, you had that." And I said, "Yes, I am putting my
He'll be
learning."
moving. He'll be moving soon to a bigger house.
Yes, he will.
Gary.
New cars, the whole
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
speaking of Wichita Falls, did you know Paul Goodrich there?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul was first Rockwall once upon a time, and he and Maggie, is it Maggie?
Yeah, that sounds
Maggie.
right.
Yeah, and his wife were special people. Paul is a hoot, especially when he talks about his golf game.
Oh my gosh, that's about all he talks about.
Yeah, well, he got a hole in one at the Shores in Rockwall, and we didn't hear the end of it for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah, he was the pastor in at First Church when I was in for a couple of years while I was in Wichita Falls, and he always talked about going and visiting the Green family, and I was like, "Oh, I see."
Green.
The Green family. I was like,
all 18 of them, huh?
Yeah, all 18 of them. Yeah. So he was, and I did a funeral with him for one of my church members who was real close to him. And I mean, that's all he did was tell golf stories about Frank. And I was like, all right, man. And his wife was like, oh, I wish he had told less, golf stories. And
I'm thinking they moved back to Wichita Falls when he retired, didn't they?
I don't remember where they moved to.
For some reason, I've been in touch with him in the last 5 years, but I don't remember. For some reason, I'm thinking he's back in Wichita Falls. They really liked it there.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Okay, this has all been taped, right?
It is. It's all being taped. Yeah, we're all recording it right now.
All the accusations against you are now part of the record.
Oh Lordy.
You don't want to see my permanent record on the file with conference. Yeah. That's a hoot right there. All righty. So we're going to start on Friday, March 12th. That's the reading day we're going to start with. It's the sort of the last little section of chapter 21, moving right into chapter 22. Now, we covered a little bit of this last week when I was moving super fast and everything's happening really quickly.
Or you were.
I was, and I apologize for that. I got carried away.
I couldn't sleep that night, but it's okay.
Oh no. Anyway, so we're going to start at Acts 21, verse 37, and then we'll go from there. Because this is where I'm going to start my message for Sunday. So this is so Paul has he's done the he was completing the ritual purification with the 4 guys that James suggested, and then all of a sudden the guys from Asia jump in and they accuse Paul of bringing a Greek into the temple and defiling the holy place. I'm backing up just one day. And they cause the ruckus, they cause the riot. Centurions come and they gather him, and then he is into the barracks. So then verse 37, just as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, may I say something to you? And the tribune replied, do you know Greek? Then you are not the Egyptian who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness. Paul replied, I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of an important city. I beg you, let me speak to the people. So what's happening here is that because of the circumstances of Paul's being brought into the barracks, is this riot that's going on. The tribune, the Roman governor, or the Roman leader in the city at this moment, thinks that Paul is a guy who stirred up an Egyptian who stirred up this group of assassins. Josephus has some history of this as well. So if you want to read more, if you're really bored or have insomnia, you can read Josephus. But anyway, most of his stuff is it's very tedious. Anyway, And I think Josephus has like 10,000 assassins or something like that, but here he just says 4,000. The Tribune just says 4,000. So he was confused about who Paul is, and so Paul speaks perfect Greek. However, in this moment, Greek is almost the universal language in this world, so it's not out of the ordinary for him to be able to speak Greek. But then what does happen is that he flips around and he can speak Aramaic. So that's what happens at the end of this particular section, is that he stands on the steps and he motions for silence. There's a great hush, and he speaks to them in Hebrew or Aramaic. Brothers and fathers, listen to the defense that I now make before you. So he's turned to the crowd that just was like calling for his life, and he's going to speak to them, and he's going to tell them his pedigree. Basically, he's going to tell them, here's who I am, here's why I'm here, and this is, something that you need to listen to. So when he speaks, turn into Saturday the 13th, when he addresses them in Hebrew or Aramaic, there's quiet, and then there's really quiet. So it's actually two different words, the hush, the great hush, and then this quiet. It's two different words in the original language. One is like this almost, the second one is this almost utter stillness, like pin drop kind of quiet. He says, I'm a Jew born in Tarsus, studied at Gamaliel in Jerusalem, educated according to ancestral law, being zealous for God. And then he throws in this little one-liner, just as all of you are today. So he's trying to connect with them. I persecuted the way up to the point of death by binding both men and women and putting them in prison. So we're all the way back to just before Stephen is killed. And then all that leading up to then his trip to Damascus. He gets the council of elders to get letters from them, and he goes to Damascus in order to bind those who were there and bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. So he's saying, this is who I am, or this is who I was, this is where I came from. I'm one of you, basically, and here's what I'm doing. And he says, so beginning in verse 6, which is Monday's reading, he starts to tell of his conversion story. So it happened back in chapter 9. He'll tell it here in chapter 22, and he'll replay it again in chapter 26. So he says, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone about me. I fell to the ground, heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I answered, who are you, Lord? Then he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. And then there's Paul's commenting that those who were with him saw the light, but they didn't hear the voice. He asks, what am I to do? The Lord says, get up, go to Damascus, and there you will be told everything that will be assigned to you. And so he's got to then be led by the hand to Damascus by those who were with him. Who saw the light but didn't hear the voice. And now we see, so in chapter 9, the story breaks at this point, and Jesus goes to Ananias and calls Ananias and says, there's a man named Saul, you need to go to the street named Straight and go to, I think it's Judas's house, if I remember. Is that right? I can't remember. Hold on. Yes, Judas's house. Yay, I was right. And so we see it from Ananias's perspective. Now we're going to see it from Paul's perspective. So he says, certain Ananias, who is a devout man according to the law. So again, he's trying to connect those who are listening to him now with Ananias and him being a follower of the law. And well spoken of by all the Jews living there in Damascus, came to me, stand beside me, says, Brother Saul, regain your sight. And then he says, the God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will, to see the righteous one and to hear his own voice. So that phrase, the God of our ancestors, ties right back to Stephen's testimony and to Old Testament way of talking about, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the way that Jewish people talked about who God is the God of our ancestors. So I mean, he's just laying it really thick on there for him. To see the righteous one and to hear his own voice, for you will be his witness to all the world of what you have seen and heard. And now why do you delay? Get up, be baptized, and have your sins washed away, calling on his name. So this is Paul's perspective of what happened with him and Ananias. And then, so that's the scene in Damascus that ends there in verse 16. And that's about as far as I'm going to get with my message in particular, just because there's just a bunch there. But then in verse 17, Paul continues and he says, now he's returning to Jerusalem. So he's been in Damascus and now he's telling them he came back to Jerusalem. And he was praying in the temple. He fell into a trance and Jesus says to him, hurry and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. And I said, Lord, they themselves know that in every synagogue I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And while the blood of your witness Stephen was shed, so this is back to chapter 7, and while the blood of your witness Stephen was shed, I myself was standing by, approving and keeping the coats of those who killed him. And then he says that Jesus tells him, go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. And so this ends Paul's speech to the people, because immediately following this, they get nuts again. They go crazy after that. So Paul has shared with them who he is, what he's about, what's happened to him, and why he is doing what he is doing. Because again, back in 21, he was accused of not only telling the Gentiles that you don't have to be circumcised and you don't have to keep the kosher laws and all that kind of stuff. He's accused of telling Jewish people that they don't have to be circumcised and they don't have to keep the kosher laws and they don't have to uphold the Torah. So he's trying to tell them, and he's making a defense of his own actions in saying, no, Jewish people, can remain, faithful to the Jewish laws and rituals, even after they come to Christ, because what's important, and he doesn't even actually try to get there about calling Jesus the Messiah, because they cut him off here at the end of verse 21. But that's the most important thing, is to put their faith in Christ. And if you want to keep the Torah, if you want to keep the kosher laws, if you want to keep circumcising, then go for it. He doesn't have a problem with that, and he'll explain that in other letters. But he's, he has made the point throughout his ministry, throughout these 3 journeys that he's just been on, that the Gentiles don't have to do that. And in Acts 15, the Jerusalem Council happened, and they said Gentiles don't have to do that. But somehow in the years since Acts 15, the word has gotten twisted around about what Paul is doing. And so they think, or some people think, that he is telling Jews that they don't actually have to be Jewish anymore, that they can just, be away with it. So, that's what his defense is all about. So when we turn the page to verse 22, they jump back into their shouts for his life. Away with him, he should not be allowed to live. And there's this, verse 23, they're shouting and they're throwing off their cloaks and they're tossing dust in the air. This weird scene where they're just like, going crazy. And so the tribune has to intervene, grab him, pull him back into the barracks. And then he orders him to be examined by flogging. Now, right, so it's almost like he's, the tribune doesn't quite know what all's going on in this moment. He thought he was one person. The tribune thought Paul was one person. Turns out he's not that person. But now he's still stirring up this riot. He's still stirring up this crowd that are calling for his life. So he's not sure what exactly he needs to do with this guy. So it's really his only option is, instead of talking to Paul, it's, well, let's beat it out of him, is basically what it is. It's like, we don't have any real, we don't have our hostage negotiator kind of thing going on here to make friends with them and everything. It's like, well, let's just beat him a little bit and see if he'll scream and yell the truth about what's going on. So he orders him to be examined by flogging to find out the reason for this outcry against him. But then he reveals this last little piece of who he really is. And it's like, it's the second time he's using his get out of jail free card, which is, I'm a Roman citizen. How can you can't flog somebody who's uncondemned, a Roman citizen who is uncondemned. And when the centurion hears about that, he's like, hands off. He goes, tells the tribune, and the tribune comes like, and they have this weird exchange about, oh, it cost me, such and such dollars for, it cost me a lot of money to be a Roman citizen. And he's like, yeah, I was born a Roman citizen. And so verse 29 says, immediately those who are about to examine him, that's the most euphemistic way I've ever heard about. It's like, anyway, who were about to examine him drew back, and the tribune was also afraid, for he realized Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. So he understands that there's some, just like in Philippi, the proconsul there understood that there could be some backlash on him if it goes to his higher ups that he's done something wrong. All right, so that's, let's see, and there's one more verse, right? Yeah, okay, so there's one more verse in chapter 22, that's verse 30. Since he wanted to find out what Paul was being accused of by the Jews, the next day he released him and ordered the chief priests and the entire council to meet. He brought Paul down and had him stand before them. So, so instead of beating it out of him, he now puts Paul in front of the Sanhedrin, basically, and they're going to talk to him. And then there's a whole scene in chapter 23 that we'll get to next week, but where Paul's not treated much better than he was in this particular chapter. Okay. All right. There. So that's chapter 23 really quickly through there. So there's, again, there's several parts to it. There's the tribune not understanding who Paul was, Paul's defense of his actions and who he is, and then his retelling of his conversion story, and then the return to the riot, his almost flogging, and then pulling out his Roman citizen card. So there you go. And that's why next week's message is called A Hot Potato Named Paul. Because everybody's like, I don't know what to do with this guy. Ah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hold on to him too long. So, because he's going to get shuffled around quite a bit over the next few chapters. Okay. What questions do you have about chapter 22? I'll see what I can do.
I'm not going to jump in first this time. I'm going to let Sandy get her
No,
questions in.
You go right ahead, Jerry.
I am curious. Go ahead.
I'm doing pretty good on mine. I have a couple, but I'll see if you do.
Well, I got a ton of problems this time. I can't seem to put my place in the position of the crowd and what they think. But I'll come back to, I'm curious. This is a curiosity question that came up while you were doing this. In verse 29, when you talked about examine, did you by any chance look up the Greek word in that to see what word they chose to use examine with?
Let me look it up real quick.
Oh, those are about to examine him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if if there aren't about 4 or 5 other words they could have picked, and that was the cheap way out, or what, you know?
Mhm.
Get
All right. It is the original, let's see, it means to examine judicially, examine a person on trial or a witness, frequently by the aid of torture.
there we go.
It only
Yeah.
occurs. It only
That's
occurs
it.
here in chapter 22 in verses 24 and 29. Those are the 2 occurrences of the word. So investigate,
Oh, yeah.
examine judicially.
Examined by flogging. Yes, I see
Mhm.
that now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay. Well, that-
One of the, like, NIV translates it as interrogate. But yeah, it's about, examining judicially. So
Yeah, it says they were about to question him.
that's a soft way of putting it.
Sure is.
So yeah, it's one of those words that gets the real meaning gets hidden in the translations. I won't get up on my original language soapbox today. But I feel like I do that too often, but anyway.
I guess in these questions where you've said, how would his audience receive this retelling of Paul's conversion?
Mhm.
What is it you're thinking there on, or what you're looking for?
Where are you?
This is March
Oh.
16th.
Oh, I'm sorry, on 16th, and then I think it's on 7th.
Oh,
The audience.
A little bit about 17 too.
same. Okay, so
Yeah.
so I split the retelling of his conversion into 2 pieces. So the first one is the first half of it where Saul meets Jesus on the road, and then the second half is when Saul and Ananias interact. So that's why they're split that way. So they would, I think that they would receive, I think what I was getting at is the idea that his audience, who are made up of devout Jews, would struggle, number one, with Jesus being called Lord, first of all, because they're Jewish. That the people that he's speaking to, they're devout Jews. They're zealous for God. He's trying to align himself with them, saying that at this moment that this happened, I was zealous for God, and I was, persecuting and going to get people who are following this Jesus in Damascus, and so so he's got that context, and then but it's this Jesus that he meets on this road that knocks him down, blinds him, speaks to him, and then tells him to get up and go, and you'll be told what you need to do. So his audience probably would have been a little on edge at this. Obviously, they don't explode until verse 22, but I would imagine, that hush that happened at the beginning of his speech is, there's starting to be some murmurs going on here. He probably keeps a pretty even keel with them as we turn to the section with Ananias, because even though Ananias was a believer, he sort of hides that. He says he was a devout man according to the law and well spoken of by all the Jews living there. So Ananias was a believer in Christ at this point, living in Damascus. That's why Christ called him to go and get Paul, or Saul at the time. But Paul sort of downplays that particular aspect of it so that the people will say, oh, he was a devout man according to the law. All right, he was one of us. But immediately he says, calls him Brother Saul, get baptized. Why are you delaying, following what, what Christ is calling you to do? And you didn't ask this, but there's an interesting little phrase there. So in verse 16, it says, and now why do you delay? The idea behind that word and phrase of delaying in the original language, it's
This
it's
must be
almost,
good.
you could translate it into Texan by saying, why do you keep fixing to do that? Like it's basically fixing to, like, I'm fixing to do that, and then you never really do it. That's really what he's saying. That's the language behind there, is that, you say you're fixing to, but you're not really, you're not really doing anything. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that is sweet.
Texas style.
Texan, yeah. So there's the Texan translation of Acts. So, so Ananias is pushing him on that, and saying, quit stalling, get going.
Then we had the one on Wednesday. What did the audience think? This trance.
Right. Sure. So one of the so this ties back to Acts chapter 9, which many scholars feel like, and I don't know if I pulled this out when we did Acts chapter 9, but lots of scholars think that because Paul was so devout in his zealousness for God, that while he was traveling from Jerusalem to Damascus, he was praying a certain repetitive set of prayers, and in doing so had fallen into a trance of some kind, and Jesus broke into that moment there on the Damascus road. So so he would have, so when he talks about I was in a trance in the temple, they would, and they put that together with I was very zealous for God, that those two things go together, that being zealous for God means that you pray fervently. And when you pray fervently, oftentimes it leads you to be in some kind of prayer trance. And therefore, then those moments open up a doorway, so to speak, or an opening for God to speak into those moments. So they would have understood that. They would have understand that if he was zealous for God, then he would have been praying fervently, and that would have led him to be open to the Spirit moving in that moment and God speaking to him. And they just didn't like what the Spirit had to say to him in that moment. Gentiles, no, that's not what you're supposed to hear. And so, no, they would not want him to go to the Gentiles. That's the answer to the second question.
Is there anywhere I could find, or we could find a little bit more information on that zealous for God and being able to, or being considered to be in a trance to create that opportunity?
Let me check.
I don't think NT did anything with it.
No, I don't think he did either. That's what I'm
Yeah, I
looking
didn't remember it in his.
I don't think it's in this one. Let me look at my other one.
Well, Dean, maybe if you find it, you could then shoot us
Yeah.
an email.
Sure. Sure.
Now I have to get back to my camping.
Oh, yes.
We are camping in the backyard, Gary.
I heard that on the meeting last night. Are you
Yeah.
sure is it camping or glamping? I didn't know.
It's glamping. Yeah, sleeping in a
But you-
king size bed. We're okay.
Yeah. Well, in place you don't have any water out there, so you're gonna have to go in the house for that stuff.
Yeah,
So,
isn't that terrible? Really roughing it.
Mhm.
But she wants to eat every meal out there. So
oh,
we're carrying trays out. I carried the oatmeal out and the eggs this morning. And last night we had to carry Taco Tuesday out.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I'll keep looking.
Well, and I'll try to find something too, but yeah, if you find it and you can share it with us, it would
Yeah.
help me be able to
Yeah.
introduce
Yeah.
that a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah, let me, I'll keep looking. Trying to remember. I wonder if that was in the lecture that I listened to from N.T. Wright. So he may not have written about it in the book, but I think he may have talked about it in the lecture. I'll have to go back and watch that again. So, okay, what else?
The poor response to his testimony on 18,
Mhm.
just because they were all hyped up not to like him in the first place, I assume. So
Mhm.
I don't know how closely they were listening to anything he said. Of course, they got quiet, granted
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if, since there were a lot of people in town, there were Jews from Asia that wanted to stir up trouble. I'm
Mhm.
thinking that the poor response was due to the fact that there were people, agitators in the crowd.
Yes, there's certainly that, but then also, I mean, the mention of Gentiles just puts them over the edge.
Gotcha. Okay.
And, you know, if these were zealous for God kinds of Jews, then, you know, and then the guy in front of them is being accused of bringing a Gentile or a Greek into the temple and had to get drug out of there and the doors closed, then as soon as that's mentioned again, as soon as Gentiles are mentioned again, that's it.
Hudson.
Hey, Hudson.
Hi, Pastor Dean.
Hey, buddy.
Hello. Hi.
What you
Coming
doing?
to camp? Oh. Hey,
Or is it lunchtime?
it must be lunchtime. Let me bring lunch. Huh?
All right.
Gotta learn to talk. Huh?
He'll get there.
I can't wait till we get to Acts 23, verse 3. God will strike you, you whitewashed wall.
Oh, yeah.
Wham.
Yep. Whitewash wall. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Good times. Hudson. What are you doing, buddy?
You watch him on TV?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm smaller than I
Oh,
usually
he's
am.
okay.
How you
We're
doing,
almost.
Hudson?
Hi.
Hello, Don.
Hi.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So at verse 22, the tide turns back in the negative direction, and
Okay.
then they have to pull Paul out, come back to the barracks, and then there's the whole, examined by flogging deal. And then he pulls out the trump card of the Roman citizenship. Hey, don't hurt. I think it's interesting that he didn't just put that out there right away, and
Kind
say,
of held it back.
he held it back.
Yeah.
You know. Hey,
Oh, hi.
everybody's here.
Everybody's here.
Oh. I think it would have been, I wonder what would have happened if he had said, I'm a Jew from, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, raised here in Jerusalem under the feet of Gamaliel. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm a Roman citizen too.
Yeah.
What would have happened if he had said that in that moment? Maybe he wasn't trying to connect. He was trying to connect in that moment with his Jewish audience.
Bye-bye.
And not necessarily his, the Roman authorities who were sort of on the periphery at that moment. His focus was on the Jewish people. So,
but don't good politicians do that all the time? You don't want to play your whole hand out.
That's
there.
right. Yeah, don't show all your cards.
Bring a little bit to see if they're going to test the waters, and then
nothing up my sleeve except this ace right here.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. I don't want to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. So there you go. Yeah. And let's see. So then on the 19th, the last verse of the chapter, the chief priests, the council, the Sanhedrin, are ordered to deal with him, basically because at this point, once again, it's not a it's a Jewish religious issue, not something that the Romans need to get involved in. So they're kicking it to the Sanhedrin. Except Paul's Roman citizenship will come back in play, and it will get escalated all the way to the top. So, but like I said, at the end of my message on Sunday, it's like all this is happening really quickly, and this is just boom, 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 until he gets on the boat. So, and I can't remember which one of the commentators, maybe it was a lecture from N.T. Wright. He said that it was interesting that the very people who were trying to keep the Jews suppressed, i.e. the Roman Empire, are the ones who, in these next few chapters, are the ones who come to Paul's aid in order to get him out of their particular, the Jewish people's hands, so that he could go and exercise his, ability to appeal to Caesar. So it's just, it's politics and religion and all that kind of jazz coming together. Anyway, so. Very good. All right. Any other questions? Anything I missed? Okay. We've only got a few more of these to do, and then we'll get back together when I decide what we're going to do in the fall.
Are you anticipating that we'll do something like this again in the fall, or
I do.
are we going to? You do? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I say, well, you'll have a respite in the summer, and you can, you could do some of your own stuff then. But yeah, I'm thinking we'll. I would like to make this a regular habit for our church to do that. But I just don't know what we're going to do yet.
Yeah.
The Lord has not revealed it to me. I have a couple of ideas, but none of them are like, do that.
Sure.
Are they both New Testament?
No, one of them's a New Testament and one of them's an Old Testament.
Before we started this, our class was going to do a study of Genesis.
Mhm.
And my reading, I ended up reading the whole Old Testament, and there's just so much in there. So very, very much. And I've restarted it now using the chronological instead of the regular Bible.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so very interesting.
Yep. It is.
Once you get past Leviticus,
don't make it too deep. I just lost one of our Sunday school members last night.
Oh no.
uh-oh.
And I finally called her to see why she hadn't been in the last couple weeks, and she can't understand Acts, and she goes, it's not your teaching or anything. Everybody else is participating, but I don't get it, and I'm not listening to the sermon on Sunday, so I don't understand that, and
Huh.
Hmm.
it
Okay.
didn't surprise me too much with her. I don't think she'll be coming back to even when and if we're back in the church.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I was
Yeah.
too, because I've yet to decide how I'm going to give that update to the past. A lot of them know her, so that will help.
All right. Okay. Well, so Sandy, let's have some conversation about that at another point in time.
Well,
Um,
you want me to go ahead? I can drop off and you guys can talk about it.
Better
Well,
do it another time. I got.
yeah, she's got grandbabies.
Oh yeah, you got glamping to do. I'm sorry.
Got glamping. Yeah, don't want to keep you from that.
No.
All right, very good. Well, again, every week I tell you this, and every week I mean it, that I appreciate what you do for our folks and for leading your classes the way that you do, and for your willingness to jump on here and listen to me talk. And
it's either that, Dean, or I couldn't be doing it. So I appreciate that you're doing it.
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
I like the background that we get as much as anything.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Very good. All righty, y'all. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you right back here next time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
You bet.